Welcome once again, my fellow manipulators of digital fate. I'm Richie, this is Capricorn, and this is my set review for the Through the Omenpaths expansion, which is coming to MTG Arena in less than 2 weeks. We're going to cover all of the white cards in this video, and also there is an early access event on Wednesday, September 17th that I'll be taking part in. I'll actually be doing a 24-hour marathon stream when that kicks off, so I'd love to see you there, and if you have ideas about decks you'd like to see me brew on that early access event, definitely let me know in the comments, because we're going to be getting up to a whole bunch of shenanigans, and I hope to see you there. But with all of that out of the way, please like, please subscribe, all that stuff helps me out a ton, and let's get on with it. We're going to start with Ademi of the Silk Shoots, a 3/2 legendary spider human hero with flash for 1 white and 1. For 1 colorless mana, Ademi gains flying until end of turn, and for 1 colorless mana you can also sacrifice Ademi, and creatures you control gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. Is it pronounced Ademi? Or Ademi? Ademi? I'm not sure. I'm just gonna say Ademi, but if you think I'm wrong, let me know in the comments. This is a really interesting card. A 3/2 for 2 with flash that can also gain flying, that can also just protect your entire board is kind of nuts. We already have Zac Fair, which does something similar. We also have the Bulwark Ox, which can do something similar. And now we have a third card here that can just protect your entire board. I'm actually looking forward to doing like a crazy board protection tribal deck where just like every card can protect every other card. I think that might be kind of insane. I think that's going to be a really fun one to try to brew. I already have a human tribal deck that kind of does something like that, and this fits perfectly into that because it is a human, but it's also a spider and a hero, so it can fit into spider and hero decks as well. I actually think this card is really good. Next up, we've got Archangler's Skyrod. This is an equipment for 1 white and 1. It equips for 2 colorless mana. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 and has reach, and whenever this creature attacks, tap target creature an opponent controls. Not too bad, nothing super crazy, nothing too good to write home about, but it's also not unusable, right? This can fill in your limited deck, your 22nd, your 23rd card, whatever the case may be. It is also worth noting that being able to more safely attack in with your creatures by tapping something down means that you're more safely able to set yourself up to use web slinging abilities, which is one of the primary mechanics in this set, and allows you to get creatures out for really cheap if you can return a tapped creature to your hand. So if you're able to more safely swing in with your creature because this can tap their blocker to make sure it doesn't die, then you can help to sort of make sure that you have something tapped to return to your hand to play one of those web slinger cards. So I don't think this is as bad as it might appear on the surface, but it's also not amazing. It'll fill in your deck. It'll be a little bit better in those web slinging decks for sure. Next up, we've got Basil Cabaretti Loudmouth, a 2/2 legendary human citizen with flash for 1 white and 1. When Basil enters, you choose one or both. Tap target creature, untap target creature. I actually think this card is really, really good. I'm kind of surprised. The fact that you can choose both and at instant speed, tap a creature, untap a creature, you could set up some really crazy combat tricks where like your opponent swings in with everything except for the one creature that they know is going to be a better blocker that they're holding back so that you can't crack back effectively, and then you flash this in, you untap your biggest blocker that swung in last turn, you tap down their only blocker they have left, you get to trade this 2/2 for one of their creatures, kill one of their big nasties with the big thing you just untapped, and then when it's your turn, untap and swing in without their best blocker on the field anymore. Well, on the field, but tapped down. I think if you use this just right, it can absolutely be insane, and I actually think it's going to have a place in Standard. I have a flash deck that I'm really, really excited about. It's like a Zorius Splash Red. It's on the channel right now, but this is absolutely, I think, an upgrade for that. Just being able to lock down a tempo advantage could be absolutely nuts in the right matchups. I actually think this card's really good. Next up, we've got Chosen by Valgavoth. I love how this Through the Omenpaths expansion is diving into lore across Magic's multiverse that's within, universes within. I just think it's really cool. So, Chosen by Valgavoth, enchantment aura, 1 white and 3. Enchant a creature you control. Enchanted creature gets +2/+2 for each aura and equipment attached to it, and all damage that would be dealt to you is dealt to enchanted creature instead. So this is basically Pariah, except it's an upgraded Pariah because it buffs the creature a whole bunch based on however many aura and equipment are attached to it. Granted, even at the bottom level, even if you have no other auras or equipment, this is going to give at least a +2/+2 plus that Pariah effect to whatever you put this on, which is actually really good, I think. The fact that it can scale if you're in the right deck, if you continue to pile auras on the same creature, or you know, equip it with equipment. The fact that it can work in either an aura heavy deck or an equipment heavy deck, it doesn't necessarily have to utilize both in order to be good. All that stuff, I think, makes it really cool. 4 mana is a lot, and I think that's the one X factor where I'm not 100% sure if it's quite going to be constructed viable, especially in Standard. But I think there's a chance, and one of the cards that makes me think that it has the most chance is Sheltered by Ghosts, because not only are you able to remove stuff, get another aura on the thing that this is on, but also give it some ward, so it's got more protection, and it's a lot harder for your opponent to take it off the field as you're trying to stack up auras and equipment on the thing, because the more auras or equipment you put on your thing, the more value your opponent can get by killing it, right? So there are some interesting cards in white that allow something like this to be a little bit better than it otherwise would if those cards weren't in the format. So I think there's a chance this could be really cool. At the end of the day, I think it's probably too expensive, and it still probably just dies to removal, whatever you put this on, so I'm not 100% sure. But if an Enchantress style deck ends up existing in Standard at some point down the line, I'm sure this card will still be there looking to be a part of it. Next up, we've got City Pigeon, a 1/1 bird with flying for 1 white mana, and when this creature leaves the battlefield, create a food token. This is nothing to write home about, but it is a nice little filler common. You know, if you're looking to fill up your 22nd, 23rd card, you can grab this pretty easily towards the end of a draft and end up using it. You know, it's not going to do any big swings or be super useful, but it is nice that it gives you a food token when it leaves. Sometimes that food token can be used for more than just the life. You can use it as like sacrifice fodder, or you can use it with something that cares about how many artifacts you have on the battlefield, stuff like that. So there is a little bit of versatility baked in, but it's mostly just filler for your limited deck. Next up, we've got Confessor's Bindings. This is an enchantment for 1 white mana. At the beginning of your end step, you may tap 2 untapped creatures and or treasures you control. If you do draw a card, otherwise sacrifice this enchantment. This card's really interesting. On the one hand, I think it's like super busted, but on the other hand, I think it's maybe not good enough. It's really weird to evaluate. 1 mana for something that can draw you a card every single turn, like basically a 1 mana Phyrexian Arena, is insane when you think about it like that. The problem is you always have to have 2 things to tap, or you just lose it, right? That's the problem. It's not like you can jam this on 1 and then wait for you to have the things that you want to be tapping each turn and then start drawing off of it. You have to wait until you're set up for it and you have enough stuff on the battlefield that you can start using it every turn. And then if your opponent does something nasty, like gets rid of some of those treasures or creatures, and now you're in a position where it's really, really hard for you to tap those 2 things each turn, you might have to just lose the enchantment. So jury's out. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that a 1 mana thing that draws you a card every single turn potentially is probably good enough in the right deck, but it definitely has to be in the right deck. You're gonna need a deck that goes super wide with creatures and or treasures, most likely creatures. So any kind of like a new Convoke style deck I think could be really good with it, but you're definitely not going to want to drop it super early, right? You're going to want to go wide with a ton of board presence and then drop this to start refilling your hand while you're using that board presence to do all of the things that you want to do. I think it has a lot of potential. I'm really curious to see just how good this one actually ends up being in practice, because like the potential's insane, but it's also hugely risky. So I don't know. I'm excited to see where it goes. Next up, we've got Costume Closet, an artifact for 1 white and 1. It enters with 2 +1/+1 counters on it, and you can tap it to move a +1/+1 counter from this artifact onto target creature you control. Activate only as a sorcery. Whenever a modified creature you control leaves the battlefield, you put a +1/+1 counter on this artifact. This is really good. This makes it so that you can put a counter on something every single turn, kind of indefinitely, right? Granted, this will run out eventually, but every time something dies, you put a counter back on this. Every single time anything with a counter on it that you control dies, it'll get a counter. So it's possible to just, like, use this with Jenova, maybe, and then you're, like, piling counters onto a creature that's a mutant, and then you sacrifice it to draw a bunch of cards, and then a counter goes back on the costume closet, and then the costume closet could put another counter on Jenova, which is putting more counters on the other thing, and you keep doing crazy stuff like that. There's definitely a lot of potential for a card like this. That being said, at the end of the day, this is mostly meant to fill in a certain slot within specific archetypes in Limited. There is a Limited archetype that cares about +1/+1 counters, and this really helps enable that in Limited. You can just make sure any sort of triggers that trigger off +1/+1 counters, or any abilities that turn on by becoming modified, stuff like that. This kind of works on all of them. It's also just pure value in a way, because it's always going to have targets. You're always going to be able to make your creatures that much better. So even if you're not able to synergize with the things you want to synergize with in the right archetypes, it's not the worst thing ever to just slam and get some value out of, and then get value back when those things die so you can keep getting more value. I think it is still usable even if it's not within those archetypes, but within those archetypes it's going to be way, way more useful. Next up, we've got Crime Scene Instructor, a 1/1 human detective for 1 white and 1. He enters with a +1/+1 counter on him, and when this creature leaves the battlefield, put its +1/+1 counters on target creature you control. Honestly, not too bad. Comes in as a 2/2 for 2 that when it dies, puts a counter on something. You could do a lot worse when it comes to commons. This is absolutely going to fill in your curve if you're looking to build that +1/+1 counter matters deck. Outside of that, it's not as good, but it's not the worst thing ever, right? It can still be that 23rd card, especially if you're desperate for a 2-drop creature. If your curve's not looking 100% cool yet, you can drop this in the 2 slot and not be completely bummed about it. But if you're in that +1/+1 counter matters archetype, this is going to be a lot better. Next up, we've got Darvel, whose Web Protects, a 3/3 legendary spider human hero for 1 white and 2, and it has in Web for 1 white mana. And Web is the same functionality as Web Slinging, so it means you can play this for just 1 white mana if you return a tapped creature that you control to your hand as you play it, which is honestly a really good ability. And having just in Web for 1 white mana here on a common is actually really, really good. All you need to do is drop a 1-drop on 1, swing on turn 2 before they have a blocker out, hopefully, and then you just play this for 1 white mana and still have one mana held up. That seems nuts, even in Limited. In Constructed, I actually think in Web's going to be super powerful. You can even do things like tap your Llanowar Elf to generate a green mana, and then play this for its in Web cost and return the Llanowar Elf, and then use the green mana that you generated to just replay the Llanowar Elf. There's going to be some really, really crazy things you can do. Anything that helps you get out more pressure earlier, cheaper than you otherwise should, is going to be nuts. And this set has a couple different mechanics that allow you to do that, and Web being one of them. I actually think this card is really, really good. Next up, we've got Eztli of the Thousand Moons. I don't know where they come up with these names. A 3/4 legendary human hero for 1 white and 4. It has flying, and when Eztli enters, another target creature you control gains flying until end of turn. This isn't the greatest, but I mean, it's a common, so you shouldn't expect too much out of it. That being said, even getting a 3/4 flyer for 5 is not the worst thing ever, especially when you can give something flying until end of turn. Now, that flying is only going to be useful with an attacker, because at the end of your turn it goes away, so it's not going to help you block with anything. At the same time, there are a ton of spiders in this set. There are a ton of creatures with reach because of that, so how good is flying? I think flying is worse in this set than it is normally. It's still going to be really important. Evasion always is. But this is kind of understated. I think if you're desperate for evasion, especially if you don't have anything better in the 5-drop slot, you can maybe play one of these at the top end and be cool with it. It's definitely not useless. Next up, we've got Free Strider Aces, a 2/3 human mercenary for 1 white and 2. At the beginning of combat on your turn, up to one target creature gains First Strike and Vigilance until end of your turn. Until the end of turn. This card's not great, but the fact that it can give something every single turn, that First Strike and Vigilance, is also not awful. I feel like I'm saying that a lot about a lot of these cards, but swinging in with First Strike and then still being able to hold that same creature back as a blocker because of Vigilance is not the worst thing ever. You make your best creature into your best attacker and best blocker, and it's a best attacker that's really hard to trade with, right? And all of that potentially even without putting this creature at risk, so you still have a 2/3 body on the field as well. I don't think it's useless. I think it could end up being good. How good? We'll have to wait and see. Next up, we've got Generous Betty Ray, a 2/3 legendary human mercenary hero for 1 white and 2. And when it enters, you put a +1/+1 counter on another target creature, and whenever Generous Betty Ray attacks, target modified creature you control gains lifelink until end of turn. I actually think this is pretty decent. You're getting 3/4 worth of stats for 3 mana right out of the gate. And then you get the silver lining value of one of the, +1/+1 of that being on whatever creature you want, not stuck on this creature, which is, I think, strictly better. Although I guess if you don't have any other creatures out, it is wasted value if you're forced to play this. But I don't think that's going to come up very often at all. So it's got some silver lining value there. And being able to turn on lifelink every single attack, as long as something with modified is swinging, is pretty good, right? You do have to attack with Generous Betty Ray herself. You're putting her at risk. That's the one thing that's kind of a bummer about her. So I see ways in which she could be really good, but I also see ways in which she could be not so good and risky. And it really comes down to just like how aggressive the meta is, how good this body is, and how good it stacks up against the other bodies that are in the set. And it's probably too soon to know that for sure. She's got some potential. The lifelink is nice, but she's very vulnerable at the same time. Next up, we've got Lively Leap, an instant for 1 white mana. Target creature gets +2/+2 and gains flying until end of turn. If it's a spider, you also gain 2 life. Nice little combat trick. You can blow someone out by blocking their flyer with your flower when they don't see it coming. Gain a little bit of incidental life if you're trying to race your opponent. I don't think this is quite good enough in Constructed, but in Limited, I think this is a nice little combat trick. And it's possible it sees play in Constructed. I doubt it, but the Spider deck, there's an offhand chance. If there's some kind of way to cross-pollinate the synergies of like a Spider tribal deck and a life gain deck, so that incidental life gain you're getting also triggers like all of your life gain triggers, something like this could be worth using. I don't necessarily think those things line up in the same deck, but it's possible, and if so, this could be a good choice. Next up, we've got a Most Helpful Weaver. This is an enchantment saga for 1 white and 1. On chapter 1, you create a 2/1 green spider creature token with reach. On chapter 2, you put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. It becomes a legendary spider hero in addition to its other types. And on chapter 3, target creature you control gains double strike until end of turn. I think this is really good. Like, for 2 mana, you get your 2/1 reach body right off the bat no matter what. So everything else feels a little bit like gravy. Maybe not completely, because with power creep today, a 2/1 reach for 2 isn't the most on rate. But it's close enough, right? So the fact that you're getting an extra +1/+1 counter on chapter 2, the fact that you're getting double strike on chapter 3, the fact that you can sometimes turn on spider synergies or hero synergies by using chapter 2 on a different creature and not the 2/1 spider that you created on chapter 1, so that you have even more creatures of whatever tribe, the spider tribe or the hero tribe, if you're in one of those archetypes. There is a lot of incidental value to be had here, which is kind of good for a card that only ever costs you 2 mana and is going to get you 3 turns worth of value. So I think this card is probably better than it looks on the surface. I think most people are going to fixate on what it does chapter 1 and not giving you enough of a body, and maybe not realize just how much value overall this generates for only 2 mana. I actually think it's really good. It's not like insane or busted or anything like that, but I think in the right deck, it's absolutely going to be worth running. Next up, we've got Mothwing Shroud. This is an enchantment for 1 white and 2. When it enters, you exile target non-land permanent an opponent controls until this enchantment leaves the battlefield. So this is basically just another Banishing Light. I guess you can now run 8 Banishing Lights in your deck if you want, in Constructed. Kind of interesting. As far as limited, it's really, really good that we get an effect like this at the common slot. It hits any non-land permanent at all, not limited to a creature, and it's a common. So it's really easy to just pick this up a little bit later in a draft and fill out your removal suite if you find yourself lacking. And that's probably the best part about this. It means there's going to be a bit more of an abundance of removal as you get towards the last half of a pack than there otherwise would be if there wasn't removal of this quality at common. So excited to see something like this. Next up, we've got Principled Referee, a 2/3 human citizen for 1 white and 3. When it enters, you choose one. Put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to 2 target creatures. And return target creature card with mana value 2 or less from the graveyard to your hand. So it's kind of like a poor man's Gravedigger with an extra point of toughness, but then has the versatility of putting +1/+1 counters on 2 different creatures. And it's worth noting it doesn't say 2 other creatures, so it can come in and put a +1/+1 counter on itself and be a 3/4 for 4. That also puts a +1/+1 counter on something else. And that's not like the most amazing stats ever, but if you're in a deck that can get more value out of those +1/+1 counters, that has triggered abilities that happen if you put counters on things, that has creatures that have abilities turn on if they're modified, things like that, you can get even more value out of this. And that combined with the versatility, where it feels kind of like a charm in a way because you have 2 different modes, 2 different ways to use it, all of it put together, I think this makes this card better than it looks on the surface. This might be one of the better commons in the set. The fact that you can just 2-for-1 with this by getting a body that still adds some pressure to the field, that doesn't make you go a whole turn without adding to the field in some meaningful way, but also gets you back your best 2-drop, gets you that card advantage, is super nice. It reminds me a lot of the commons and uncommons we usually see at least one of in each set, where when they enter they draw a card in some way. It feels kind of like that, except the card that you draw is a specific 2-drop creature from your graveyard rather than a random card from the top, which sometimes will be better because you could always hit a land and it might not be as useful. So at least you're always hitting gas. And if you can't use that ability because nothing died yet, you have the +1/+1 counters. So I think there's a lot of value in this, in the versatility for sure. I expect to see this being played a decent amount in Limited. Next up, we've got Remarkable Readings. This is an enchantment aura for 1 white and 3. Enchants a land. When it enters, you create 3 1/1 green and white human citizen creature tokens. Enchanted land has pay 1, tap, target creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn for each creature you control, activate only as a sorcery. This is another one that I think is way better than people give it credit for. Sure, 4 mana is a lot, and that's a good argument you can make, and I'll agree with you, but you get 4 permanents, you get an enchantment, and 3 1/1s, and sometimes just having another enchantment on the field matters in some ways. Going wide with an extra permanent matters. Worst case scenario, you could sacrifice it to like a bargain effect, or some kind of sacrifice, Disturbing Mirth, something like that, and get extra value for it and still keep the 3 1/1 tokens, which is not nothing. But then it also gives you this ability, if you're in the go wide deck, whether it's the Convoke deck or just a normal sort of aggro weenie deck, for just 1 mana and tapping the land, so I guess it would kind of be like it's 2 mana, you get to just buff one of your dudes to high hell. And if you have flying, or even better, you have trample on one of your dudes, being able to make one of your dudes super tall while your board in general is super wide, kind of lets you attack on 2 fronts in a way. And your opponent has to deal with sort of both avenues of attack at the same time, which can be incredibly difficult sometimes. So once again, I think this one is way better than it looks on the surface. You can jam it out when you already have like an Elspeth on the field and you're getting 6 tokens instead of 3, which is kind of nuts. You can use it in token decks to like draw cards off Caretaker's Talent. There's a lot of things that are going to synergize with this. I think it's really, really cool. I'm excited to experiment with this. It could wind up that at the end of the day, it's just too expensive and you need to be doing way more with your 4 mana on turn 4 or whatever. But I think there's a chance this could end up being really good in just the right deck, so I definitely want to experiment. Next up, we've got Sarn of the Silken Throne, a 3/4 legendary spider human hero for 1 white and 3, but it has Enweb for 1 white and 2. So it can come out for only 3 mana if you can return a tapped creature that you control to your hand. At the beginning of your end step, if 2 or more creatures entered the battlefield under your control this turn, you draw a card and gain 2 life. This actually synergizes super well with Enweb or with Web Slinging, because the turn that you play it for 3, you can bounce your 1-drop to your hand and then have a 1-drop in your hand to replay that same turn, so that you can enable being able to draw a card and gain 2 life, which is already good. And then you have Sarn just sitting there on the battlefield, so that every single turn after that, anytime you can double spell with creatures, you're going to be drawing a card. It's also worth pointing out that the creatures just have to enter the battlefield. They don't have to be played. So if you have things that can make tokens every turn, if you have like an Elspeth on the battlefield with this, literally just upticking Elspeth and making 2 1/1 tokens is going to immediately trigger this, draw you a card, gain 2 life. And then if you're in a life gain deck, that gain 2 life could also give you other triggers that pop off. There is a lot of potential for a card like this, especially when getting a 3/4 body for 3 mana is already kind of on rate. Not good enough on its own for sure with today's power creep, but with this other ability, I actually think it's got a chance at seeing some play constructed. At the very least, this is absolutely going to be an easy slam dunk in your limited deck if you're focused on building an Enweb deck, for sure. And even if you're not focused on building an Enweb deck, I think this might be worth running. Anytime you just get to incidentally get 2 creatures onto the battlefield in the same turn, you draw a card and gain 2 life. And even if you only do that once in the whole game, I still think this card is worth it. So yes, pick it high, slam it, play it, move on with your life. Next up, we've got Spectacular Tactics, an instant for 1 white and 1. Choose one. Put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. It gains hexproof until end of turn, or destroy target creature with power 4 or greater. So not only is it protection, it's protection that gives you value that stays forever, so that it's adding to your board presence and not only being protection. And it's got a pivot where if you don't need the protection, it's just straight up removal for anything that's big, 4 power or greater. This card does everything at instant speed. It doesn't even need to target something that's attacking or blocking or anything like that. Just kills something big or protects your dude. And if you don't need to protect your dude and they don't have anything big to kill, at the very least, you could always just put a counter on a dude, which is a worst case scenario, last ditch effort. You don't want to do that unless there's a good reason, like it's going to allow you to kill a creature in combat you otherwise wouldn't as a combat trick, or get through for the last point of damage to kill your opponent, stuff like that. But still, the versatility of this card is nuts for a common. I think this is probably one of the best commons in the set for limited, for sure. It might even see play constructed. I'm going to go out on a limb and say probably not, because even though it is versatile, it is kind of limited. Having to pay 2 mana to protect your guy is not as good as some of the other ways to protect your guy. And, you know, there are better ways to kill things for 2 mana without having to worry about jumping through the hoops of a power 4. But in limited, having this versatility is going to be nuts. Absolutely a very high pick in limited, especially for a common. Next up, we've got Sudden Strike, an instant for 1 white and 1. Destroy target attacking or blocking creature. I love this card as well. It's just straight, easy to understand, 2 mana, kill an attacker or blocker, instant speed removal. I mean, instant speed removal, right? You have to do it after they declare an attack or a block. But still, being able to kill any attacker or blocker for 2 mana at instant speed, that's pretty good. You're going to see this, you're going to grab it, you're going to run it, and you're going to be happy. Next up, we've got Surus Spider Silk Innovator, a 0/1 legendary human scientist hero for 1 white and 1. When he enters, you create a 2/1 green spider creature token with reach. You can also pay 4 mana in the colors of Bant to transform Surus, but activate only as a sorcery. So the fact that for 2 mana, you get an 0/1 and a 2/1 with reach is really good to me, even if you're just, you don't even want to transform this and you're running it in like a sacrifice deck where you now have a 2/1 reach that can trade with a creature and this random 0/1 that you can sacrifice to get value with your sacrifice payoffs. Even just that, I think, would be pretty good, but the fact that you can pay 4 mana to transform this makes it way better. It transforms into Surus Silk Tech Vanguard, a 4/4 legendary spider human hero for 4 mana in the colors of Bant. And what's cool about this card is you can just play it as its backside straight from your hand if you want to skip over playing it as a 2-drop, which is really, really cool. It is a 4/4 legendary spider human hero with vigilance and reach, and each legendary spell you cast that's 1 or more colors has Enweb for 3 mana in the colors of Bant. Kind of insane. Being able to literally cast any legendary spell in your hand for only 3 mana by returning any tapped creature at all to your hand is kind of nuts, especially when you consider what we were bringing up earlier. Like, you could just use a Llanowar Elf to tap for green and use that to pay for the green mana of the Enweb cost so that you only need 2 more mana and then just bounce the Llanowar Elf. Seems kind of crazy. Just legendaries shooting out left and right once this thing flips, which is kind of nuts. It's also a pretty decent body. A 4/4 vigilance reach for 4 is nothing to scoff at, especially if it already got you value by making a 2/1 spider with reach. There's just a ton of value in this card. There's a lot you can do with it. I can't wait to sort of brew into like a legendary slash spider deck. If those 2 tribal types can kind of cross-pollinate, I think it could be really interesting. I'm absolutely going to be brewing with this one for sure. Next up, we've got Verilax the Haven Skin, a 5/5 legendary symbiote hero for 5 mana, 5 white mana in particular, which is a huge monocolor commitment. So most of the time, this is probably going to be in a monocolor deck. It's going to be really hard to run this in limited, I think, although there are a bunch of cards that are hybrid mana in this set, so it's going to be a little bit easier to run a monocolor deck. That being said, I think most of the time you're only going to bother to run this if you open it in your first pack. That being said, it's a mythic, so you're not even going to see it that often in limited. What it's really meant for is constructed, and this thing is a monster. A 5/5 legendary symbiote hero for 5. When he enters, if he was cast, you return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield, and if damage will be dealt to Verilax, prevent that damage and put that many +1/+1 counters on him. This seems insanely crazy to me. Just absolutely nuts. It's basically like a Phyrexian Obliterator, except it's also a Reanimator spell, and it just grows. It doesn't get rid of your opponent's stuff, but it grows and it reanimates, and it's just nuts. Also, because it has to be cast, it also synergizes decently well with like Enweb or Web Slinging, where you can swing in with this. Your opponent doesn't really want to block because they're just going to make it bigger, and then you just bounce it to your hand with Enweb and replay it to get another thing back from the graveyard. Sometimes you're not going to want to do that because you're probably going to be so close to just winning if this guy's swinging through anyway. But I'm sure there could be certain situations that pop up where getting to play this guy a second time and reanimate again could end up being super nuts. But even just the first one is nuts. Getting a 5/5 body and your best creature out of the yard, and the 5/5 doesn't die to damage, and it just gets bigger. It's also super nasty with like damage-based sweepers, any kind of like red spells that are going to do X amount of damage or have however much damage to all creatures. Wipe their board, make this guy super huge, and then swing in for the win. That seems awesome to me. It's also super good with fight spells, just like Phyrexian Obliterator. Sure, you're not making your opponent sacrifice permanents, which is way better than getting +1/+1 counters, but you're still able to like kill things with fight spells and make this guy even bigger, which is still really, really good. So I think there's a lot of things you can do with this card that are just going to make it really, really interesting. I'm excited to brew with this one as well. I know I've said that about a bunch of cards already, but this one just seems nuts. And in Constructed, we have enough dual lands right now that I think you wouldn't even have to run monocolor. I think you could get away with maybe splashing a second color. You wouldn't want to go too crazy. But I think you could splash another color running only dual lands to give you access to that color so that every land makes white and still make this work in a 2-color deck, which is really tempting. I'm excited to see what we can do with this card. So if you have ideas, let me know in the comments. I think this one's kind of nuts. Next up, we've got Yera and Oski, Weaver and Guide, a 3/3 legendary spider human hero for 1 white and 2. It has in web for 1 white again, so another way we can get a 3/3 for just 1 mana, which is nuts. And as Yera and Oski enters, you look at an opponent's hand and then choose a card type other than creature. Spells of the chosen type cost 1 more to cast. This card just seems nuts to me. Not only are you getting a 3/3 for just 1 white mana, as long as you can tap something, whether it's a Llanowar elf or something that you swung with on turn 2 that you played on turn 1, whatever the case may be. But then also you're just like choosing any card type, and then they have to spend more mana to play those, so you're like taxing your opponent into oblivion. Sure, you can't choose creature. I guess that makes sense. You also can't choose land. I mean, technically you can choose land, but it only affects spells of the chosen type, not playing land, so it won't actually, you know, make you pay more to play land. But making every spell that's an instant cost 1 more, making every enchantment cost 1 more. If you're up against one of those annoying Simulacrum Synthesizer deck, making everything that's an artifact cost 1 more is also nuts. And there are ways in which you can hit creatures with this by choosing enchantment or artifact, knowing that they've got, you know, either enchantment creatures in their hand, like FOMO, or artifact creatures in their hand or whatnot. You can still figure out ways to have this tax creatures, which I think is really interesting. But at the end of the day, a 3/3 for 1 mana that's going to make it harder for your opponent to play spells is really good in my opinion. I think this is absolutely going to have a place in Standard. I mean, the meta's kind of crazy right now, and the power level of Standard is so pushed, so it's hard to say just how important this card would be. I think if we were in a normal Standard environment, like the old 2-year rotation Standard with 3 or 4 sets a year, I think a card like this would be super relevant in the meta. But there's like, what, 18 or 19 or some crazy amount of stupid sets in Standard these days, so hard to say if it stands up to that much push, but there's definitely potential. I think this card could be nuts. I will for sure be brewing with it. And that brings us to our last card in white. This is Zora Spider Fancier. Fancier? Financier? Financier? Spider Fancier. She fancies spiders. I get it. She's a 0/2 legendary human citizen for 1 white mana. Whenever another creature you control enters, you gain a life. If it's a spider, you put a +1/+1 counter on it. So even if you're not in Spider Tribal, she actually seems pretty good, right? She's like another 1-drop that can gain a life every time a creature you control enters. Be in life gain decks in Standard, trigger those life gain synergies. All of that's really good. But if the thing that you're playing also happens to be a spider, you can also put a counter on it, right? Similarly, you can run this in a deck that doesn't really care as much about the life gain, but is a Spider Tribal deck, and every single creature you play after turn 1 when you drop this is going to get an extra counter on it. And you will gain some incidental life as well that will help you win the race against aggro and things like that. And that could be another really good way to use it as well. So I think this is kind of versatile, and it's going to be really fun to experiment with this and see which deck it ends up being better in. But Spider Tribal or life gain decks absolutely want to at least try this out and see how it works. In Limited, I think this is going to be nuts because there are just so many spiders. Even if you're not in the spider archetype, you're incidentally going to be running a number of spiders in your deck for sure. So the fact that this can gain you a bunch of life over the course of the game and at least hit a couple creatures with +1/+1 counters might still be worth including, although not as important and not as high up as, you know, if you were running like a Spider Tribal deck for sure. But that's going to do it for white. Thank you guys so much for checking out the video. All of the other colors, colorless and multicolor, are on their way, so look forward to those. I am excited about early access, so please join me for a 24-hour marathon stream Wednesday, September 17th. And like I said, if you have ideas for decks, definitely post them in the comments because I'm going to be trying to brew all of the ideas that come in and at least try them once, see how they do, see what kind of crazy deck ideas we can come up with. And we're going to start dropping deck techs that same day, that Wednesday. The first one's going to go live on YouTube and every single day after that. So look forward to all of that. If you haven't already, like, subscribe, do the thing. It helps me out so much, and I'll see you on the next one. I'd like to thank the sponsor of today's video, Wonders of the First. Wonders of the First is a brand new collectible card game similar to games like Magic the Gathering, Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon, featuring a unique action-based resource economy that helps avoid pitfalls like Mana Flood or Mana Screw, and a battlefield containing multiple realms that unlock over time as you fight for control of the stones. The first 400 card set is called Existence, and they've even partnered with Star City Games to host their competitive play tour at every single SCGCon event starting in August. The game contains alternate borderless art variants, as well as highly sought after limited edition numbered prints, culminating in a one-of-one stone foil. And the best part is that the developers have a community-first approach, with a card database and deck builder available via Cardio, as well as a version of the game available on Tabletop Simulator, all for free. For more information, be sure to check out wondersccg.com today. That's wondersccg.com. Thanks so much for checking out my channel. I'd like to give a huge shout out to all of my patrons over at Patreon. Without you guys, this channel would not be possible, so honestly, thank you from the bottom of my heart for all of your contributions. If you haven't yet, like and subscribe. The more likes we get and the quicker we get them, the bigger this channel will grow and the faster it will grow. I'd love nothing more than this channel to become something very special for you guys, but it's entirely up to you how fast that happens. Also, if you'd like more deck techs, that's somewhere over there. And if you'd like to see what else the channel's been up to lately, that's somewhere up that way. Also, subscribe, circle below, do all the things.